Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and thank you for stopping by again. It's been a while, as you probably noticed. It's been a very, very busy time for me, and it's going to continue to be in the next few weeks. But what I had done was I had made some short videos, sort of segments, I was going to put together for one video. And a couple, 3 days ago, I sat down with them, and I ended up with a 52-minute video. So I said, no way, this is not the way to do it, and trashed it all, just threw it out and start over again. So what I'm going to do is provide 4 videos. I'll get them out as soon as I can. The first one is today, which responds to some of the questions that have come in on a variety of different topics. I want to get those done. The next one will be on the economy. That'll be fairly brief compared to past videos, but I want to tell you where we are in terms of the economy. Then we have real estate, which is a more substantial topic. I'm going to be discussing rentals along with sales there, what the situation is currently and might be expected. And finally, that Panama City introduction, which has turned into be quite a struggle, and I, again, don't want it to become an hour-long video. So I've worked on this, and I think I've got the right approach, so we will see. But those are the 4, and so let's get started right now with the first one. Oh, yes, Mr. Black, you'd sent in a couple remarks on an earlier video I'd done on passport, citizenship, and so forth in Panama. Those were perfectly good comments. But the only time it's ever happened to me at this channel, I went in to approve them, and for some unknown reason, clicked on delete instead of on approve, and they disappeared. And YouTube, when you delete a comment, it's gone forever. You can't pull it out of trash. So your 2 short but perfectly valid comments did not get published, and if you want to put them up again, that's fine. And my apologies. I will try to see to it that that never happens again. I do think that, sometimes it can be a little challenging. I moderate all the comments that come in because I do get a handful of people who are full of hate and often have nothing whatsoever to do with Panama. It's just they're angry, and there are other places for that sort of comment. So all comments are moderated. I don't mind somebody who questions this or disagrees with that. It's a matter of being decent in the language you use, and in the understanding that insulting others is not the way to act on this YouTube channel, and that is that. Okie doke. Now, Mr. Black's comments were on citizenship, and if you've seen my earlier video on that, you know how very critical I've been of sites that keep talking about it. Citizenship is something relatively easy to get after you've gotten a visa, you've been here for 5 years. Well, that's not the case. It simply isn't. It's not at all easy. And at the time, I had no record of anybody who had actually done that. Well, a gentleman, maybe a week ago, I think the same one who a year ago had told us that he was in the process, actually got his citizenship. Hallelujah. In 14 years, finally found one. He'd gone through his 5 years of visa. He waited. He took his tests, exams, and everything else, and then waited 2 years because the President of the Republic has to sign off on every single request for citizenship. Panamanians don't hand out citizenship easily or lightly here. Their attitude is very simple. We give you everything, basically, you need as a resident, except you don't get a passport, you're not a citizen, you can't vote in elections, you can't run for office, and so forth. So they're quite demanding, and sometimes they'll just wait and see whether such and such a person actually is going to stay in the country. And a couple years later, if he's still there, maybe so. So President Varela did sign that one in. It's the first one I'm aware of. Maybe he'll do another one. I don't know. He'll be out of office here early next year, and we'll have a new president, and maybe he'll be faster at it or not. I have no idea. But it is not common, and if you come assuming this is going to just be a fairly simple, straightforward task, that is not the case. Simple as that. But I am delighted, and I do want to mention that this gentleman made it through the whole process successfully. More power to him, and it's good to have another Panamanian citizen. Now, I did have one email, somebody from South Africa, as I remember it. What I do is I sometimes get a bunch of emails, and they have questions, and I just jot them down on a separate piece of paper, meaning to get back to them. And whatever happened to his email, I have no idea. I have not been able to find it. Very frustrating. But I remember it because of a very unusual question. So he'll know who he is when he hears this. I hope he hears it. And if I can find that email, I'll let him know. But he asked if there was a windy season. Windy season, a lot of wind. And apparently, as I vaguely remember it, he was talking about people in Bokete, which is in the western part of the country, up in the mountains, had said that the winds were very, very strong and very, very powerful. Was that the case? Was there a windy season? And the answer to that is no. There is no windy season here in Panama. When you're up in the mountains, if your home is exposed, you're very likely to feel strong winds. It's not unusual up in the mountains. There's nothing much to block the winds. You keep in mind that we have the Atlantic Ocean on one side, the Pacific Ocean on the other side. At one point, they're about 30, 35 miles, 50, 55 kilometers apart. And we have a mountain chain that pretty much runs down the middle of most of the country. The result is we have all sorts of microclimates. But in the mountains, when the winds come over from the Caribbean side particularly, they can be pretty strong. And they bring rain. The Caribbean coast, the Atlantic coast gets more rain than the Pacific coast. So we're not unhappy about it bringing rain. But you do get winds up there. And if you go and looking at that area, you should probably experience it. But just ask people if they think it's a problem. I've never heard anybody complain. But that doesn't mean there aren't people out there who think it's too windy. But we do not have a windy season, okay? But I thank you for asking, because I enjoyed that question. Now, I've gotten several messages. Again, this has been going on ever since I had the YouTube channel, and I have commented on it elsewhere, and I will comment on it again. And that is the gringo price myth. That there's a thing called gringo prices, and gringos referring typically to Americans, and unfortunately for them, Canadians sometimes get lumped in too. It's not a bad word here. It's not a terrible thing at all. I call myself a Panagringo, a Panamanian gringo. But people get a good kick out of that. But the simple fact of the matter is that there is no gringo price. They don't care what color your passport is. They don't care whether you have a passport. You can be a Panamanian citizen. This is a real estate market like it is everywhere in the world. And somebody who's obviously new and doesn't know the area at all, and quickly becomes apparent that they don't really know much at all, and they ask how much something is, they'll ask for a much higher price. If you pay that price and it's way out of line with what's being charged elsewhere in the area, that isn't a gringo price, that's an ignorance price. So let's get that straight, because that really bugs me. It isn't that hard. If you see something that you really like and you get a price, talk to real estate agents in the area, talk to expats, whatever, and ask them, is this a reasonable price? We often give it per square meter if it's in land, it's just straight land and so forth, whatever. And they'll tell you, no, that's way too high. But if you don't take the time and trouble to look around and check other properties, and what do? Go in and buy the first property you see? I don't understand it. If you go around and look at similar properties, and they do exist, and that's what real estate agents are for, you tell them, this is what I've seen, this is what I want, this is what they want to charge me, and the agent says, oh, I can get you that for a lot less money. Go with him or her and take a look and see. But don't just buy it and then 3-6 months later somebody says, oh, you paid way too much for this. You could have gotten it much cheaper. And then complain that Panamanians were responsible for this, and that they overcharge you because you're a foreigner. Now, they overcharged you because you were willing to pay, and you were too ignorant to know that you were paying a high price. It's not their responsibility to tell you, oh, sir, you have offered far too much money for a property like mine. You can get a property like mine for a lot less money. That's not their responsibility, guys. It's your responsibility, and it's the same if you're a Panamanian in the United States or anywhere else, anybody. So that, no, I just get very tired of that. But people will insist because they need to blame somebody else for the mistake they made. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, that's how it comes across to me. So be it. Now, this one's come in from a number of people too, just recently. And this is the question, is the banking system in turmoil? No, it is not in turmoil. Apparently, I'm not sure how the whole thing started. I don't really care. I mean, there are always websites and YouTube channels and what have you, there are all sorts of stuff. But apparently the argument is that since the Panama Papers, suddenly the banks are being much more demanding in the paperwork they want, and it's gotten far more difficult to open an account, and this is an indication that the banking system is in turmoil. Our banking system is so solid and so conservative, it's ridiculous. They have a high levels of liquidity, they're profitable, they're well run, and they are carefully watched by the banking superintendency. What can I say? This is simply not the case. And if there's turmoil, everybody's going to know about it. If there's turmoil in the banking system, this is a major global center for trade. And the banking system is constantly being used for paying for transits to the Panama Canal, for storage at the free trade zone, and for 1,000 other things that Panama provides. The banking system is very much advanced here compared to many other neighboring countries, and because it has to be. And we have many banks, but most of them are, not most, many of them at least, I think probably the majority, are commercial banks. They don't have checking accounts and savings accounts. They're there to service the businesses in their nation who use the canal, because you have to pay up front and check. The money has to be in their account before you're allowed to go through the canal, I can assure you. Likewise, the free trade zone, I mean, it's cheaper for many international companies just to use their local bank, and their local bank wants their service, so they set up a branch here in Panama to take care of their clients. And instead of losing them in the large sums of money, they move hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single transit through the canal, for example. And we're talking billions of dollars for the free trade zone and the canal over the course of a year. Yeah, they want a piece of that business. They don't want some local bank getting it. So they set up their own bank, and it takes care of their own people, and it makes transfers cheaper and easier and so forth and so on. So the banking system is not in turmoil. Now, as far as the requirements for opening a bank account here are concerned, I don't know where some of this comes from, but let me explain to you. In 2004, may have been late 2004 or 2005, I'd already made up my mind I was going to relocate here. I was spending a lot of time traveling back and forth to the U.S. I brought cash down with me when I needed it. And I just said, this is ridiculous. I've got to have an account down here. So I went to the bank that had been recommended. It's Scotia Bank. It's the trade name of the Bank of Nova Scotia from Canada, and it's very well known for having branches all over the Caribbean basin. Basically, wherever Canadians go and set up, relocate or set up businesses or what have you, Scotia Bank will follow. And in this country, the great majority of their depositors are Panamanians, and of course, many of the rest of us, I'm an American. I mean, nobody thinks in terms of them being a Canadian bank, but they are a Canadian bank with a local board of directors and incorporated locally as well as is required under the banking law. But so they have to meet both the requirements of the Panama government and of the Canadian government. So they're a very serious bank, a good bank. I like them very much. But here I walked in, and all I wanted to do was set up a savings account. No checking account, just a savings account. So it's just my money going in and my taking it out. And then I realized what I was having to go through. This is 13, 14 years ago. And I had to, what did I have here? I have a list. I had to get the cover sheet, the summary sheet of my United States tax return for the last year, indicating my income and where it came from and so forth. I had to provide 2 bank references, and I said, I only have one bank. It happens to be also my brokerage firm. I do all the banking, checking through that. So I only have one of those references. And they said, well, that's all right. Get a letter of reference from somebody here in Panama, a citizen here, a reputable person. I went to a businessman here whom I had met, and we got along well. And I said, will you give me a letter of reference? And he said, sure. And he wrote it up, and that was more than suitable. But I had to have those letters. I was interviewed by a bank officer of what I was doing, what I was intending to do, and so forth, my need for banking services. I was also asked to provide a rough estimate of how much I expected in an average month to receive from overseas, and if I were to, and what was the highest amount I expected to receive. I just told them the best I could, my best estimate, especially on the highest amount. I didn't know. I was too new. I did all of that, and it went to a review committee, my dossier. They went through it, and 3 weeks later, my account was opened. I was really surprised. But in other words, what is common today, I mean, you go through a lot of questioning and so forth. It tends to be faster today because they sort of streamlined the system and they're more used to it. But you still have to provide a lot of information, and it's been that way for a long time before the Panama Papers, for God's sakes. It's just standard operating procedure. It comes as a surprise to many expats, particularly from North America. I mean, I honestly don't know if a Panamanian tourist can just walk in and open an account in the U.S., but who knows. But down here, and nowadays especially too, tourists don't set up accounts. I mean, they don't want tourist accounts. They expect you to, if you show evidence that you're in the process of getting a visa, all right, fine. They're set up for residents and for citizens right here in Panama, not for tourists. All of this has been in place for a long time because of the concerns not about Americans or Europeans or Canadians, but really other Latin Americans, and let's be honest, a lot Colombians, because of the drug business. And it has been a major issue, thus requiring every bank to know their client. That's the rule. And now it may be that 14 years ago, whatever, there was a small bank somewhere that would overlook these things. I wouldn't be shocked, but the major banks certainly would not have overlooked them. And more importantly, if any others did, they have been tightening the regulations and really scrutinizing things for years now, again, before the Panama Papers. So banks that were that sloppy have gotten their hands slapped, or worse, are fined for having done that sort of activity, but that's in the past. There's nothing unusual about it. It's normal. It's nothing strange, and it has to do with this requirements that have been pretty much forced on Panama in many ways, but we are a very really globalized economy in the sense that we must deal with nations all over the world using the canal, the banking systems, everything else. We have to meet the requirements of others. And I often say to people who are visiting here who are concerned about that and say, Panama wasn't set up for you to have a private account here that didn't require any background or anybody can walk in and set up. Panama was set up to do business. It's a business country. And they don't want your narco trafficking money if you have any. But that's the reason for it, and that's why it's going to continue that way. It's no big deal. It goes on all the time, and there are tens of thousands down here that have gone through the process, and we have our accounts. And you know, it's interesting. In the first year, they keep an eye on it, and a couple of times I had amounts of money transferred down in excess of that highest amount I thought I was going to receive. Both times the bank called and they said, Mr. Adams, you received this amount of money, and this is in excess of what you had thought you were going to get in a single month. And I said, yes, I understand it's because of this and this. And they said, fine, thank you. And it went in my file. They just put down a message, my explanation of it, and it was fine as far as they were concerned. That happened twice, if I remember correctly. And after that, nothing. I mean, now you're just I passed all the tests. You know, I'm a legitimate person. And, but if I were to say what I did, I sold some land. I paid taxes in the U.S. And I had a large check as a result of it. I went to the bank, and handed them the check, and I handed them a copy of the contract. So they know exactly where the money came from, and they thanked me for that, because they probably would have going to have to ask for it anyhow because of the large amount of money involved, and they would have to be able to convince the banking superintendency that this money was from a legitimate source and not from some illegal activity. And I had the justification, the paperwork, the notary, public notarized and everything else right there for them. So yeah, took care of that. And that's all part of my file too. So it's annoying to some people that they have to go through this, but it's the way that it is. And as I mentioned briefly a little earlier, if you're a tourist, I have people come down as tourists and they want to set up an account in a bank. It's very difficult to do that here because, I don't know whether it's easy for a tourist to do that in another country or your country. I don't know. I've never asked in the U.S. But the simple matter of fact is that these are small accounts. They don't need them. Their attitude is you can use an ATM card here and your debit card and your account back home. You can bring cash or whatever. You can use credit cards and all this thing. We don't want to go to all the trouble of setting you up as an account and having you in here, and then 3 months later the whole thing closes down, or you don't close it down and wander off, and we never hear from you again, and so on. And it means they don't know their client well. So this is not a good thing. If you come in and say that, they'll say, when you have your visa process underway, come back, and then we know you're going to be a resident. We have that evidence. You will have to become one, and we'll have to be notified of that. And when you do, because you will receive your ID card, and that has to be part of your account here. Just let us know, and we'll take care of it. And, that's the end of the problem. Occasionally, I've heard of somebody who is down a long term and a tourist. This is years gone by, though, who was able to set up an account. Knew somebody who knew somebody type of routine. Well, all right. The bank's the one taking on the risk there. But this is certainly not done at Scotiabank, I can assure you, nor any of the other major banks that I know, whatever. So that's what I want to say about that. I mean, there's no turmoil. Turmoil is the wrong word. The banking sector here is very profitable. It's very liquid. It meets every international standard out there, and it's well known for that, and this is not a problem. If there's going to be turmoil, everybody who deals here would know it, and it would be in every newspaper, and we would all know it. This is not a large country, and it's not a deepest, darkest Panama. Things are very much public. Okay, what else do we have? Let's see if there's anything more there. No, alrighty. Now, okay. Yes, one couple asked, they wanted to set up a language school to teach here. Could they do that? And I responded to them that, sure, I mean, you can do that. Expats have set up language schools here in Panama. But if you're going to get any serious attention, any clients, you're going to have to get the authorization or the approval of the Ministry of Education, which oversees language schools, among others. Otherwise, Panamanians aren't going to want to go there, or other people aren't going to want to go there if you're not at least approved. And it may be that you can't even function. I don't know for sure. I mean, people individually teach classes to small groups in their home or individuals or what have you, informally, and that's nobody thinks about that. We're talking about setting up a school. If you're going to set up a school and advertise as a school and bring people in, you darn well better go over to the ministry, fill out the forms, and go through their process if you want to do that. So I think the important thing, and most of you don't want to set up language schools, but basically it's if you want to set up a business here, you're going to have to follow regulations, and that's what a lawyer's for, and that can be done. But don't expect that you can just walk in and do anything you want to. I don't know. Something about maybe 50 years ago or 40 years ago, whatever is possible. I doubt it, actually. But in any event, it isn't now. You do have to fulfill those requirements. But a lot of people do own businesses here. And again, it's a lawyer who helps you put it together so that it's an acceptable affair, and so on. And a tourist can own a business here, even not being a resident. So that's always interesting. Fine. And that's it. I think those are the basic questions I have received recently. So I'm not going to carry on much longer than simply to tell you that I'm always here to try to answer these questions as best I can, and my apologies to the gentleman whose email I can't find. But I hope he comes into this, and if I find it, I'll send him a note and say it's in a YouTube video. Thank you very much for stopping by. I'm going to be bringing out the next one on the economy. I'm going to try to get that done today, too. I have to sit down and put it all together and turn it into a proper YouTube video and get it uploaded and everything else. But time allowing, I've got some other stuff I need to do, but time allowing, I should get the economy one out of the way, God willing, today. And then the others following as soon as I possibly can next week. I'm back. I just realized there's one question I had not answered. Someone had written that they'd read somewhere, someone complained about the infrastructure, I assume roads, and the internet. And their internet service had been down 3 times this morning. And that individual blog or whatever, they asked me what my experience was. Well, from a road infrastructure viewpoint, we are considered to have far better infrastructure than is true of our neighbors. And that the Pan American Highway, which is the main artery of this nation, has just finished being expanded to 4 lanes through most of it, not all of it, but almost all of it, Panama City to David in the west. No sooner is that done than they announce and have begun the next project on the Pan American to expand it to 6 lanes, and including some portions, brand new portions that will be built to take people around towns rather than through them. Fine, but that's a $900 million project. It's a big one, and we take road construction here very seriously. And although we don't have autobahns, we're not Germany, in this region we are very good and we get along fine. It's improved so much in the last decade. It's almost unbelievable sometimes how fast. And more is coming. As for internet connection, I don't know where these people were. I assume in the countryside. I don't know which service they were using. We have cable, we have DSL, we have various satellite services and so forth. I know in some of the countryside, some rural areas, that they have problems with their reception. And the key, if you're out in that area, well, wherever you go, is just ask people, what do you use for the internet? Because everybody's on the internet, Panamanians included, and you can pretty soon find out what the story is. As for me, I was asked from my experience. This year, I had one period of 2-3 hours we were off. And I think it had something to do with nearby construction or whatever. That was highly annoying. A couple other times we had maybe a 10-minute break, which is also annoying. But that's it for 9 months, and I don't think about it. It just happened. So be it. It's not a major problem at all. It doesn't disturb me except when it's underway. Whether it's 10 minutes or an hour doesn't make much difference. I'm annoyed. But no, otherwise I get my 100 megs down without difficulty. And I can even get faster rates if I want to spend the money. As far as I'm concerned, I'm doing just fine with what I've got. Yeah, our infrastructure is just fine. I doubt very seriously you're going to find better infrastructure in other countries in this region, either in roads or in internet. But it's quite satisfactory. Hope that helps. Thank you. And see you next time, I hope.